Hey friends, the dust has settled on another stage of CDM action, and so it's time to check in with our tier list. Now, it's been a couple of days since CDM Stage 2 has ended. I took a couple of days for myself to relax and rewind after a very busy week, not just watch partying all of the action, as you'll have seen in my YouTube channel, or as much of the action as possible last week, but also I was part of the commentary team for the Air Force Gaming World Championships, and so I had a really busy week, about 4 or 5 days, where I basically woke up at 7 a.m., and went to bed at like midnight or something like that, and just been non-stop stuff all day long. So I took a couple of days to myself. I've recharged, and now it's time to check in with those all-important tier lists. Now, it's worth saying, as you guys already know, I tweet these tier lists every single week, but these videos, the ones after each stage of action, are the most important for you guys to check in with, because they are going to be the most informative, they're going to be the most complete, because those are the ones where you're going to see all of the teams having played each other. The dust has settled on every single stage for these video tier lists. With that said then, let's jump right in. Let's not waste any more of your guys' time. Let's start with the S tier. Now, I think the S tier is going to change pretty prominently this week comparatively to last week, because you've had a few teams in Masters actually kind of beat one another. There's a lot of close teams, I think, in S tier. I think even we were all joking, right, that saying that, like, well, there is a small chance that there's like 5 or 6 teams in S tier, and it's very difficult to actually, decide what order those teams go in, and, where do you draw the line between S tier and A tier. Now, obviously, that's not the case, just to be clear. I'm not going to kind of sit on the fence here and put 6 teams into S tier. That's not happening. But I do think I found the place to draw the line, and I also think I pretty much have the order here of which teams I want to put where. I am going to start off by being pretty consistent with what happened last week, and I'm going to say OUG, I think, still are currently the number 1 S tier team, although I will say, and just to be clear, I don't think by a large margin by any stretch of the imagination. Now, I think they're first for just a couple of key reasons. First and foremost, they had the best record in Masters. They beat 4 teams. They only have 1 loss in Masters, and that was down to SPG. OUG, obviously, also the best control team in CDM by a very large margin as well. Their difference is like +2, so they're winning control rounds on average by like 3-1 scores at least in control this season of CDM. They're also one of the strongest hardpoint teams in CDM as well. The biggest issues I would say with OUG so far this season are really a couple of things, and I think they're probably interconnected issues as well. A lot of people have already identified the fact that OUG Search and Destroy is extremely weak. They are one of, if not the weakest Search and Destroy team in Masters, and that shows as well. They've lost pretty much every single Search and Destroy that they've played in Masters, apart from the Search and Destroys that they won in overtime. So all the Search and Destroys they took, more or less, apart from I think it was 1 versus X-Rock, they had to go to overtime to actually pick up those victories. So OUG, very, very strong in the respawns, hardpoint, and control, almost unbeatable in control. And yet, when it comes down to Search and Destroy, that's where they need to fix their issues. And, I think, connected to that is the fact that OUG's biggest weakness is themselves, right? I still think they're better than everyone else. And when they are playing pretty much perfectly, which happens quite often, right? It happened versus Godlike, it happened versus Q9, it happened versus Wolves. Like, OUG are very difficult to beat. But sometimes they make errors in their own gameplay, especially apparent in Search and Destroy, where they do silly chows, they just don't play well as a team, and it happens every so often, and it was a big reason why they did end up losing to SPG. So, OUG, not a perfect team by any stretch of the imagination, but I think they're as close to a perfect team as we currently have right now in CDM. Second behind them right now, I'm going to put Q9. Maybe controversially, and honestly, again, I'll add an asterisk to all of this by saying I don't think I would particularly care if you guys were to put like Q9, Wolves, all of these teams in the same tier and interchange them however you want. We'll get to that in a second. But Q9, number 1 team in Search and Destroy right now statistically across Masters, across CDM. They're a phenomenal Search and Destroy team. They also have to be very high in all the other categories as well. They're the number 2 control team. They're the number 4 hardpoint team. Q9, more or less right now, have it all. They are a pretty strong squad, and yet the biggest issue I think that Q9 have right now is that, they are outperformed in maybe some of those modes by the teams that are above them by a large margin. So there's actually a big gulf in hardpoint, for example. Wolves and OUG are ahead of them by a large goal. You know, it's been difficult for them. Control as well, despite being the number 4 control team, their control matches have actually been pretty close. You know, again, you know, you look towards the results for Q9 right now, and they had to go to Game 5 versus Wolves and OUG, and they lost both of those. They had to go to Game 5 versus X-Rock, and they did manage to take that one. So right now, I think for me, Q9 are actually probably one of the most consistent teams we have in Masters, but I don't want to put them above OUG right now. I wouldn't feel comfortable doing that. To me, just behind them are still Wolves at this point in time. Wolves are the number 1 hardpoint team statistically. Now, that's again boosted a little bit by their stage 1 Group B. Obviously, they had a ton of easy teams in there, but I think that still kind of plays out in Masters. They only lost 1 hardpoint across the entirety of Masters, and that was to SPG. So are still there. They're also a very strong control team. Their respawns in general is pretty good. There are Search and Destroyers, I would say, the only place right now that Wolves probably aren't that great. They've been, you know, losing them here and there. They're not dominant anymore. And I think that's the key thing for Wolves is, you know, if we're looking at where they are in S tier, you know, we look at back in stage 1, and I wasn't comfortable saying that Wolves are, you know, not the only team in S tier because we had no evidence to suggest they weren't. Now I think it's pretty obvious that Wolves are in amongst it. They're not the dominant team anymore. For the final team in towards S tier, then I'm going to put SPG. SPG in towards S tier feels about right to me. Obviously, SPG came out, they beat OUG, and that was the first real indicator to me that, hey, SPG are, you know, hey, they're a pretty solid team. They also beat Wolves, and both of those victories, I think, very obviously put SPG up here into S tier. For me, I think they just about occupy the kind of the edge of this tier because they did end up losing to Godlike. They're not a perfect team by any stretch of the imagination. And also, I would say, of the 3 teams above them, they are very easily the weakest at respawns on the whole. Their respawns are really, really weak. They can win games, but they do so via a very small margin for the most part. And their Search and Destroy is kind of almost, not necessarily carrying them through CDM right now, but it is very easily their strongest factor. And so I think that keeps them competitive, if not beating some of these top teams. And that's where SPG are at right now, is their hardpoint and control needs improvement, but their Search and Destroy is so strong that it would be difficult not to say that they're in S tier. And this is where I'm going to draw the line. So I think these 4 teams are S tier, and I wouldn't be upset if any of you wanted to interchange them in any real way, because I think they're all so closely matched. But as I said, I think, you know, leaving S tier where it is, I think OUG, when they play perfect, when they aren't kind of throwing, I think they are the strongest team in S tier. So that's where I'm at right now. Then I go to A tier, and actually, I'm going to do something a little bit controversial here. I think Godlike are a better team than X-Rock is where I'm at right now. And just like OUG in a way, Godlike are their own worst enemy because they are a very strong team across pretty much every single mode when they're playing well. And I think that's especially true in Hardpoint. They are still, I think, like a top 3 Hardpoint team in CDM. They're still performing very, very good in that mode. But outside of that, you know, I think what lets them down is their map picks. And this is something that's been talked about to death in the community. Godlike are, you know, very often they're losing like the first Search and Destroy in a series, and they want to play the second, and they just don't pick a hard point that is strong for them. They'll end up picking something that's like strong for their opposition, and then they'll do the same thing in Control. And it's losing them series. And being 3-0'd by OUG, by Wolves, you know, by Q9, is enough for me to say Godlike are absolutely not in the S tier. I do still think they're an A tier though, and of course for those of you guys who haven't kept up, they are now going to be in challenges for stage 3. I think they're probably going to go through every single challengers team in stage 3 very easily. Hopefully I don't end up eating my own words on that one. But yeah, not a bad team by any stretch of the imagination. I just think they need to figure out those map picks because right now it ain't doing it. And come those seat deciders for playoffs, that's something they're going to have to fix. In A tier, then the last team in A tier, and of course the last team from Masters will be X-Rock. I actually, you know, do think X-Rock are slightly worse than Godlike. They are such a weird team to watch, right? You know, they are the worst hardpoint team statistically in Masters. It's actually quite funny that the hardpoint team is as bad as it is. Their control is okay. You know, they're relatively high level on it. I think they're like number 3, I want to say. And that's pulling them through. But their Search and Destroy is the weird thing. X-Rock and Search and Destroy are so weird to watch. They will burn like 50 to 60 seconds off the clock before making the first move. And yet it works more often than not. Statistically, though, that's actually not true. Their search and destroy is relatively low compared to the other teams, and if they do end up winning, it's kind of like every so often they'll get a win in search and destroy. I want to say they lost the majority of them in Masters. And so, yeah, like X-Rock, they're pulling maps off some of these top teams, but I don't think they are better than Godlike. Just purely based off what I've seen, I think Godlike are more competitive against those teams. I think X-Rock, just slightly lower. I think they could figure things out and go higher. But right now, I feel pretty comfortable saying that, hey, Godlike and X-Rock, they are A-tier teams. Let's start talking about Masters then. And this is where I think the separation of teams starts to become, at least for me, a little bit easier when we talk about which teams I would put in what tier. I think that AG are still the best team in Challengers right now, at least. They lost just one series in Challengers. Actually, here, I'm just going to say I think AG and WL are like the B tier teams, right? They lost one series, and it was to WL. I put them above WL because WL ended up kind of slipping up a little bit towards the back half of Stage 2 Challengers. I think they lost to Seoul, and that kind of, it lost them a few more maps. On the whole, AG had a better map record as well. So I do think AG are just above WL, but I don't think there's much to split it. And again, just like S tier, I wouldn't be upset if anyone at home was to say WL would be the number one team in B tier, because they are more or less equally matched. And WL, of course, are going up to Masters for Stage 3, so they should get better as well, even though their record will probably plummet because they're facing heavy competition in Masters group. Next up, let's start chatting about the C tier then. And I'm going to kind of pair together, I want to say two teams in C tier. The first team is Seoul. Seoul are one of the weirdest teams to watch in CDM because they are so damn 50-50. You look at kind of their early performances within Challengers, and, they came out and they played like okay. Should we say okay? They had to go to Game 5 versus Exceed for 1 to beat them. They did end up beating Accelerate, but they lost a map. And then, of course, they came out and they lost to Diabolos and AG back-to-back. And then for the final game of Challengers, they came out and they beat WL in a Game 5. And it's like, Seoul are just so hot and cold. It's also what happened back in Stage 1 as well, where I think they pushed SPG to their limits in the last series. So it's like, Seoul, I think, I'm still going to put them in C tier right now. I don't think they hit B tier, but I do think they're a C tier team. I think they're relatively high, but they just have to be consistent. Not quite consistently looking at being competitive with AG, even though they beat WL. I'm yet to see whether that's a fluke or whether or not there were legitimate improvements in that series. Next up, C tier, I've gone for Diabolos. I think Diabolos are another one of those teams that, again, they feel like they're being competitive. They are pretty much consistently beating the teams below them as well. Just on the whole, Diabolos look like a really well put together team. And just to kind of back that up with the records that they have this season, obviously, they beat Seoul 3-1, they beat Exceed 3-1, so they lost a couple of maps to those teams, but they still actually won those games. They took AG to a map 5, and they took a map off of WL as well. So, honestly, I wouldn't be opposed to putting DBS at the top of C tier again, with Seoul just below them. I think those guys are pretty interchangeable right now, but I do think they are way above the teams in D tier. And speaking of D tier, this is maybe the other controversial move that I'm going to make for this tier list. I'm going to put Exceed in D tier. I don't think that they are as competitive in Stage 2 as they were in Stage 1. That shows out again in the results. You got to go to Game 5 to beat Accelerate. Kind of suggests that you are a really closely matched team with those guys. You end up losing to Diabolos and WL and AG. And I guess the one kind of positive thing here for them is that they send Seoul to a Game 5. And that's really about it. That's the only positive thing I can say for them. I think they are teetering on the edge of C tier, but I don't feel comfortable putting them in C tier. I think if you compare these guys' performances, with these guys' performances against the teams in B tier, I think there's a large gulf between them. And so I feel pretty comfortable putting these guys in D tier. Next up is Accelerate. And I'm also going to put these guys in D tier just because I think Kingzone deserve a tier of their own. I'm just going to slap them here now. We don't need to talk about Kingzone because they're not even in Stage 2. So we could actually, you know what? Let's just get rid of that. All right, never mind. They're not in here. Just ignore these guys. Accelerate are in D tier, in my opinion. Obviously, things are maybe about to get worse for Accelerate as well. If you guys have been keeping up the drama, Accelerate obviously have just been disqualified from Stage 4 of the World Championships. That probably is going to affect their mental somewhat. Obviously, they do actually get a game versus Salt coming up in Challengers. That's going to be interesting. Amidst all that drama, and of course Godlike as well. There's a lot of fun matches coming up for Accelerate. Whether or not they actually perform, though, is a different story. For me, though, right now, I think it's been pretty obvious that Accelerate are a cut below pretty much everybody else in CDM as it currently stands. You look at their records, and again, 0-3 versus AG, 0-3 versus Diabolos, 0-3 versus WL. They had to go to Game 5 against Exceed. Oh, I should say they pushed Game 5 to Exceed to a Game 5, excuse me. Because, again, these matches are not great for Accelerate. They took a map off Seoul, and that's probably the nicest thing I can say about Accelerate. I think they were the worst team in Stage 2 by quite a large margin. And I know, they were playing without Extincts for the first couple of games, but I just don't think that excuses it. Accelerate have some teething issues right now, and they definitely need to fix them. So that's my tier list as it stands right now. And, again, I think there's some tentative things there. Like, for example, I wouldn't be opposed to putting Exceed into the C tier. I wouldn't be opposed to having X-Rock above Godlike in the A tier. I wouldn't be opposed to swapping WL and AG. But I think more or less the grouping of these teams as they currently are is pretty much where I would put them. And I'm pretty comfortable with this list as it currently stands. I don't anticipate this list changing that much now moving forward, I will say as well. Stage 3, it's coming up. It starts this Thursday. It's going to be the first couple of matches here for Stage 3. We're going to see how WL does in Masters, and I think that's going to be interesting. As I said, I think Godlike are going to pretty much smash their way through the entirety of Challengers. I don't think they're going to have any problems whatsoever. Maybe AG can give them some, but I doubt it, honestly. And I think the one thing everyone is keeping an eye on, and I'm certainly keeping an eye on, is that S tier listing going to change in any real way? Because right now, I feel comfortable with it, but that doesn't mean it's definitive by any stretch of the imagination, and a couple of different matches could definitely change it. So, yeah, that's my tier list after Stage 2. Guys, let me know what you think in the comment section below, and if you agreed with this tier list, make sure you like the video as well to show me that you did, and if you disagree with it, also let me know, I guess, in the comments below. If you like all my content, and including my watch parties, make sure that you subscribe to the channel for more Call of Duty mobile content. We got the rest of CDM still coming up, including, as I said, those watch parties this Thursday. So make sure you stay locked to my channel for all that and more Call of Duty mobile. Thanks, guys, for watching. See you next time.